Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show really the Immortal Game that was played in 2019 between Alireza Firouzja and Murali Karthikeyan. So this game is really incredible because you witness probably one of the greatest queen sacrifices of all times, and this queen sacrifice is special because it's not such a queen sacrifice that lead maybe into forced tactical sequence. What I mean about that is that many times you see maybe a beautiful queen sacrifice that lead into, I don't know, forced checkmate in 4, forced checkmate in 5, or similar stuff, or maybe this queen sacrifice will be a sacrifice where you gain really great material. You can maybe gain 2 rooks and a bishop maybe for the queen, and then you have a great compensation and still you can win the game very easily. But this queen sacrifice was a little bit different because the queen sacrifice happened in an early stage of the game in move 9, and then you have to still struggle for the win. You have to still battle for the win. And when it comes to chess history, I think we have witnessed 2 great games with a similar queen sacrifice. It was the first game that I think was similar was the beautiful queen sacrifice by Garry Kasparov against Vladimir Kramnik back from 1995, where Garry sacrificed his queen, but his compensation was only 2 minor pieces and 1 pawn for the sacrificed queen. So he had to still struggle, he had to still battle for his win. And also in the game between Rashid Najmedinov against Chernikov, we have also witnessed a similar queen sacrifice. So I think these 3 games were simply the most brilliant games when it comes to queen sacrifices, and that's why I wanted to show especially this game, because we have also some different roles here. Many times we have seen Alireza Firouzja on the winning side, and of course we will cover probably many of Alireza brilliant games, but today's hero of the day is Murali Karthikeyan, so which is really incredible. He destroyed here Alireza with an immortal queen sacrifice. Put your seatbelts on, this was one of the greatest games of all time. So let's check out now the game. We have d4 by Alireza Firouzja. Murali's response was knight to f6. We have c4, g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7. After e4, d6, we have reached now the King's Indian defense. And many great games of all times I think were the King's Indian games, because the game is so tactical. There are so many tactical things that can happen to you from white's perspective, from black's perspective. Really great stuff can happen always in the King's Indian defense. So after move d6, here Alireza plays the so-called Makagonov variation, which is in some occasions a prophylactic idea to not allow your opponent to pin you, because in some of recent games that we have covered, we have seen in the game by Fabiano Caruana after move knight to f3 that the potential bishop to g4 leads into positional problems for white. Then of course the battle around the square e5 is a little bit weak for white because the knight is pinned, and then after e5 you see the knight is controlling the e5 square. So that's why many times white is not allowing this move bishop to g4 and plays a calm move h3. So here the continuation, we have Xingtai CHN, and now also what the cool part about this move h3 is that you can still develop the dark square bishop on e3, where it cannot be of course attacked by the knight on g4. So we have now c5. So you have to break now the center with e5 or c5. You can be the judge of any position because both of these moves are perfectly fine. I myself like more the move c5, I have to say it, because it leads into a more tactical game. After move e5 the game could be maybe too close. Here of course also after move c5 d5 could happen, but still I think you can break this position easily with the move e6, so this would be probably the main line. But here in the continuation of the game, Alireza's response was knight to f3 in this particular game. So if you take here, if you ask yourself the question what happens if you play d takes c5, this is not so good for white. Although it's tempting, of course, you think you can gain a pawn, but from this point on black can take over, I think, and will have probably a comfortable game, because okay, probably black will take d takes c5. You can maybe trade off the queens, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and now after bishop to c5 it seems so that you gain something, but actually the bishop on c5 will become now a huge object of the attack by black, because black will simply play knight to c6, normal development, but also protection of the e7 square. And now after potential, I don't know, knight to f3, you see with the move b6 black gains an extra tempo. The bishop has to retreat, and now you can play many things. You can play knight to b4 for instance, is perfectly fine. You can play also calm move bishop to b7, normal development. You can also play here something like knight to d7, maybe to liberate your long diagonal for the dark square bishop. Then afterwards something like knight to c5, and even after bishop to e3 or something, you can play even bishop to c3, weaken the pawn structure further. because after b takes c3, okay, you gave up the dark square bishop, but the queens are off the board, and okay, you could face maybe some dark square problems, but I think this is a playable position for black, especially because of the fact that the game is simplified. We have clear targets in the continuation. We can attack, of course, these weaknesses. There are now 3 weak pawns in the continuation, so I think, as I said, it's a playable game. So after move c5, as we said, d5 and d takes c5 are of course opportunities, but here Alireza plays normal development with move knight to f3. Here queen to a5 was played. In the continuation we have knight to d2, because of course Murali's threat was the move knight to e4. Here black played this annoying pin against the knight. There are now 2 choices how to defend this pawn. You can play bishop to d3, or you can play the move knight to d2. Bishop to d3 is actually more accurate, then the game would lead into something like this: c takes d4, knight to d4, and we would reach now actually sort of a similar position like in the Murali bind of the Sicilian defense, because the c5 move has been played. So almost like in the Sicilian, many times in Sicilian, Dragon Sicilian, you reach many times a similar position, maybe not the same, but with same strategical goals and with the same setup in the center, where white is here the pawn on e4, c4, and also the knight on d4. This should be probably a better continuation for white, but unfortunately for Alireza, and fortunately of course for us, for the beauty of the game, Alireza played a slightly inaccurate move knight to d2, and this game leads now into complications, because here Murali plays immediately c takes d4, which is perfectly fine, because you cannot take with the bishop. Bishop to d4 is a disaster for white, because now knight to c6, again this tempo, we get the extra tempo against the bishop, and after bishop to e3 there is now a beautiful tactical shot that I think you have to know if you are studying Sicilians, Dragon Sicilians, and especially King's Indians, maybe even Benonis. If you are into this kind of defenses, you can play now really a dirty, beautiful tactical shot, knight to e4, and this is really possible because after knight to e4 you can also take out with this other knight. The same tactic will happen. Knight to e4 leads now into disaster, because after f5 you don't have a good square for the knight. Even if you move it to g3, f4 will happen, the fork, and even if you retreat here to d2, again f4 will happen, that traps the bishop. You have lost the square here for the knight. The knight is taking here the square d2, and the bishop is trapped. So again, as I said, even if you take out with this other knight, again f5 will happen with the same tactic. So really beautiful stuff. So after c takes d4, the only way to make something out of this is to play this intermediate attack by with the knight against the queen, which is perfectly fine. But here Murali has of course now several choices. Still you can retreat with the queen to e5, and this will be probably an equal game. So from this point on, I think black has equalized the game and has, I think, a solid position, because the main idea for white would be something like queen to d4, knight to d4, and now with knight to c6, again we have reached a similar position like in the Murali bind, but again with the important fact that the queens are off the board, and black has, I think, a solid position. Black, I would even love to play more this game from black's perspective, especially because of the fact that the light bishop is many times here in the Murali bind simply a bad piece. So that's why here with the, again, the maneuver knight to d7, knight to c5, maybe b6, bishop to b7, again the dark bishop of blacks will be a monstrous piece in the continuation. So that's why here after move knight to b3, Murali probably thought, okay, could maybe equalize the game, but here we'll witness now the most immortal queen sacrifice. Really wild stuff what happened here. Murali sacrificed the queen on c3, and this is really stunning tactic. I'm not sure how to describe anymore this move, because it's such a surprise, and there are also some psychological elements of sacrifices. I think when you play a game and it's a calm game, and then you play maybe a solid opening like Alireza did, and then you face such a stunning tactic, I'm not sure if you can get back psychologically into the game, because it happened to me many times when my opponent pulled off a stunning tactic. I couldn't get back into the game. I have to say it like this, because you're just thinking about this move through the whole game. You cannot focus anymore on any other move. So I think the same thing happened to Alireza, because still in 2019 he was a much younger player. He was still a child, he was still a prodigy, and of course he had some issues of course in his development, but now Alireza is one of the greatest players now these days. But in this particular moment, I think you are focused simply about this move, then you cannot focus focus anymore about any moves anymore. So after move queen to c3, there are not many continuations. You could try maybe here bishop to d2 to trap the queen in a different way. Here in the continuation, Alireza simply took the queen, but let's see also the possible continuation. If you try bishop to d2, then queen takes b2 could happen. Again, you could try to kick away the queen, and maybe you could try to get sort of a perpetual, and then the game should end in a draw. But actually, black doesn't have to do this. Black can even sacrifice the queen again for the rook, queen to a1, and then after queen to a1, we can take out this pawn. And you see now the bishop is hanging. The problem is now you cannot take the pawn on d4. That's not possible because you get knight takes d2, bishop, king takes d2, and with knight to c6, this knight gets pinned, and it's simply game over here for white. So as I said, you have to accept here the queen sacrifice with the move b takes c3. That's exactly what happened, and here Murali had the opportunity to play d takes e3 and grabs now another piece. And that's what I meant about the psychology, about tactics. Here there is only one good move that prolongs the game for white, and you have to find it. Here Alireza should have played the move queen to c2. Every other move is simply bad here for white. After move queen to c2, okay, black could have a little bit fun here by playing e takes f2, then king to f2, and after something like knight to c6, we should play here from white's perspective rook to e1, protecting now our pawn and hope for the best. So the engine gives here slightly advantage for white. That's not the point, of course, how we should watch now this game just by calculating this engine moves, but as I said, this is the only way to prolong the game here for white. What you cannot also do is to move f takes e3. You cannot take out this pawn. That's not possible because knight to e4 will happen, and then you will lose the battle also around the square c3. So here in the continuation, Alireza tried a different idea. He tried f3, but now look at this pawn. The pawn on e3 is such an annoying mf pawn. Here I'm not sure how to attack this pawn further, because here Murali plays really the most accurate moves. He plays first of all the move knight to h5, and this is really great because he liberates again the dark square bishop, which is now very important. We have seen also in this lines where you play knight to d7, knight to c5, the main strength of your position here from black's perspective, it's actually your dark square bishop, because white has now several dark square weaknesses. First of all, we have taken out the dark square bishop, and look at this: f4, g3, d4, e5. All of these dark squares are simple targets now for black. So after move knight to h5, the problem is now you cannot attack this knight in order to make it disappear, in order to force the knight to step back on f6 again, because you witness simply this tactic, bishop to c3. If you move, then even knight to g3 is here a possibility. So the king is here really naked. So that's why after move queen to knight to h5, you have to play queen to c1. And that's really a passive move. You don't want to queen just to have it on the board like protecting one pawn. This is not a good position of the queen. And when we watch now the compensation, okay, black gained a couple of pawns, black gained 2 minor pieces, but the activity that black gained is also beautiful. Now white is simply on the passive side. So queen to c1, after queen to c1, we have bishop to h6. So now Murali has the opportunity to protect this annoying pawn on e3, and this is now perfect position. So we have here now g4, knight to f4. Again, you don't have time to take this pawn because knight to g2 is the fork. You take the knight, but you lose the queen on e3. So this is not possible. But because here after move knight to f4, Alireza is retreating now to d1, and now comes the actual first mistake by Murali. He plays the move knight to e6, and here he had the opportunity, I think, immediately to simplify the game and go into a favorable endgame, and probably he would win the game, because here an immortal move would have been knight to d3. Because look at this: after bishop to d3, we have now this one, e2. Okay, you take, and now after bishop to c1, rook to c1. Notice now that okay, still we have the same pawns, pawn count on the board. Black is also 7 pawns on the board. White is also 7 pawns on the board, but the pawn structures of blacks is much healthier. So here I think black has to win this endgame, because first of all we can notice that this light square bishop is so bad on d3. It's blocked out by its own pawn structure. Now in the near future black can play some ideas of b6, knight to d7, and then knight to c5. We'll simply fix the position around the square c5. Many times in Dragon Sicilians, especially against the Marazzi bind, you will see this idea to let the position get fixed around the square c5, and then probably with bishop to e6 we can also attack the c4 weakness. we can use, of course, the c file in order to attack both of these weak pawns. So as I said, probably this is a much better here position for black. At least I'm not seeing good ways anymore for white to make anything out of this. Basically white is struggling, battling here for simple draw. So this was really a beautiful opportunity for Murali to seal the game here. Knight to d3 would be really immortal game. But here after move knight to e6 was played, a slightly inaccurate move, but still a good move. Black is staying in the game for sure. So here king to c2, we have knight to c6, and now h4, bishop to f4, because the threat was of course the move g5 and then to lock the bishop. So that's why here you have to play bishop to f4, staying with the protection of the e3 pawn. So we have here queen to d1, we have knight to e5, very important move, because as we said, this is maybe not the same position but a similar position, because we always evaluate the position by the pawn structure, and now the pawn structure didn't change like in the previous line. We still want to play rook to c8 and attack the c4, attack the c3, include now all of these pieces into the game. Still also b6, knight to c5 is also working as a strategical idea to fix the position around the square c5 and just continue the pressure on the c file. So the strategy didn't change, although there is still the queen on the board, there are some rooks on the board, but as I said, black is here very great attacking opportunity. So here knight to c1, we have bishop to d7, and now we have a4, trying at least maybe to provoke some weaknesses here on the queen side. Here in the continuation we have rook from a to c8, perfectly fine, as we said, attacking the pawn on c4. So now comes again a new critical moment of the game. Here Alireza makes another mistake, knight to e2. He should have played simply knight to d3, and that's the only way maybe to get out of this mess. It seems like a strange idea, but the problem for black in this position is that you cannot take the pawn on c4. This is not possible, and that's probably what Alireza missed, because here white would simply take the bishop on f4, knight to f4, and now with queen to e1 everything is glued together. Now we're threatening bishop to c4, and then here to take the pawn on e3. But okay, here Alireza didn't play that. Probably in this continuation, of course, black doesn't have to take the pawn on c4, can also take out the knight on d3. After bishop to d3, still black has this opportunity to fix the position around the square c5, and now also the a4 pawn is a little bit weak, so you have to play something like king to b1. Probably again black is better here, but as I said, at least white would defend the position for a while. But knight to e2 is not good, because here we have the immediate opportunity to retreat with the bishop. Okay, you have your fun with g5, but now the bishop gets maneuvered to a new diagonal. All of the g5 was in the beginning sort of a threat, but now look at this in the continuation. The f3 pawn is hanging, the pawn on c4 is hanging, the bishop gets liberated, the c file is of course an object of the attack. Bishop to c6 can be played, further attack on this one, and look at the queen. Alireza has still the queen on the board, but he never had time to activate the queen. The queen is now on the starting square, which is really wild. The queen is a bad piece here. So in the continuation we have bishop to h3. If you try here knight to d4, maybe to force the trades of pieces, then of course we can play knight to c4 immediately. After bishop to c4, actually even knight to d4 is working, comes with check, because you cannot take, also because of the activity of the c file. So notice also that the king is on the c file, so many dirty things can happen on this semi-open file. So that's why bishop to h3, we have knight to f3, so this pawn was really weak. We have queen to d3, and now here Murali again attacks the queen, but also is attacking the weak pawn on c4. We have queen to e3, finally Alireza gets rid at least of this annoying pawn on e3, but it's not a good compensation, because here Murali has of course the opportunity to take out the weak pawn, and it comes again with a new tempo against the queen. So we have queen to f2, we have rook to c5, we have a rook to b1, and now bishop to c6, attacking now the pawn on e4. So we have here bishop to g2, and now comes again, I think, a beautiful move by Murali, and here he shows really his great attacking skill. He plays a beautiful f5 move, because he noticed that if you take, for instance, e takes f5 in this way, then you get bishop to g2, and then if queen to g2, you get the fork on e3. Look how these pieces by black are dancing, really immortal stuff. So after move f5, so you have to play, that's why g takes f6 en passant, but now bishop to f6 comes into the game with the direct threat. You see the queen is here on the f file. Of course, there are some dirty discoveries as a possibility here for black. So you could try now maybe to escape. This wasn't played in the game. You could try maybe queen to g3 to get out of this tactical mess on the f-file, but actually it's not getting better. We can play rook to h5, attacking first of all this weakness, and here you can also try rook to h1, but now we just skip over, and here we're jumping to the other side, and we're attacking now this pawn that cannot be protected. So there are simply too many pawn weaknesses. Look at this pawn islands. Although you still have the queen, as I said, but all of these pawns are weak. The king is always endangered, and the activity of black's pieces, it's really amazing, and amazing stuff here by black. So here after move bishop to f6, Alireza tried to simplify the game to finally reach the endgame stage, where he hoped probably to get a draw position. But now here black plays simply bishop takes c3. We have queen to c5. Here Alireza took at least the rook on c5. We have knight to c5, rook to f8, king to f8, king to c3, and here after move knight to e5. Let's stop and evaluate the position, because okay, obviously white is up the exchange, has a rook for the knight, but this is not something that should be in white's favor, because first of all we can notice that still black is 6 pawns on the board, white is only 3. So when we count material, black is up many points. So all of what we can notice is that again the bishop is a bad piece, the e4 is a weakness, again a4 is a weakness. So again the structural problems are present here in white's position. The pawn islands are something that bother white in the continuation of the game. So after move knight to e5, we have a5 by Alireza. Here Murali plays simply knight to e4, bishop to e4, bishop to e4, and look at this now. When black took the pawn on e4, we have now 2 connected pass pawns that are supported by 2 minor pieces, and this is now a completely winning endgame here for black. So knight to d4, we have bishop to d5, knight to b5, attacking the pawn, a6, knight to c7, bishop to c6. So nothing dramatically changed. Alireza had some fun with some attacks, but no real threats are here in black's position. So rook to f1, king to g7, knight to e6. Okay, you're probably not going to get checkmated just by the rook and the knight, so that's why rook to f8. We have king to h5, rook to h8. Now h6, we have rook to h7. Here king takes h4, rook takes h6, and now we have king to g4. The pawn on g6 is perfectly fine, is very well protected. So knight to d4, king to g5, attacking the rook. We have rook to h2, bishop to d5, and now rook to e2, trying at least to compete here on the e file, because there's here you have to make something, because as we said, the main strength in black's position is these 2 connected pawns in the center of the board. So king to f4. So you see Murali is playing really this game in a beautiful way, activates the king like you have to do, of course, in an endgame. In the endgame, you shouldn't tolerate your your king as only a piece that you have to defend. You have to activate your king. You have to include the king into the attack. So after move king to f4, rook to e2, rook to f2, pardon me, knight to f3. We have rook to e2, attacking the king, and now e5, simply pushing the pawn further. Of course, it comes with a beautiful tempo against the knight. The knight has to retreat here to c2, bishop to e4. We have knight to e3, d5. You see we're letting just this pawns rolling. We have king to b4, and after knight to d4, rook to e1. Here after king to f3 in this position, Alireza Firouzja resigned, because there is really a huge problem in this position. Although there are many problems, probably black is just pushing the pawn. But even if you try something like king to c5, the problem is that the knight is trapped here. Even if you move, you don't have a good square for the knight. That's the most important thing. You see all of the squares are cut off for the knight. So you see it's the knight is simply out of game. So you don't have a good square. Even if you move it, then we just push the pawn. So we can play knight to c2, also the fork. So there are so many things that happen. So you have to here step back. You have to move the king, and now with king to f2, the game is over. So you cannot protect anymore your rook. You cannot protect anymore your knight. So this is now completely winning. And as I said, in that position, Alireza Firouzja resigns. So really what to say, this is one of the greatest queen sacrifices of all times. I'm not sure how to explain this game. This were really beautiful tactical stuff that can happen in a chess game. I think this is really similar to the game that was played between Kramnik and Garry Kasparov, but also in the game between Nezhmedinov and Chernikov. We will cover probably also in the continuation of my YouTube chess channel the game between Nezhmedinov and Chernikov, but you can also check out the Kramnik Kasparov game, which is I think everything really beautiful with Immortal Queen Sacrifice. This was also such a beautiful game, and I hope that you show it to someone, because it's really something worth to study. It's really one of the best chess games of all time. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game like I did. If you want to see more Immortal games like this, check out my best chess games of all time series with some more queen sacrifices, rook sacrifices, the double attacks, decoys, deflections, and similar stuff. And if you want to see this game between Kramnik and Kasparov, here's also the link to that video, which that we have covered also with some beautiful tactics. And if you want to see the top engines battling it out in their best chess games, check out my commented chess games played by computers, with some games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.